All of these little tiny conversations that happen throughout the day, all of those touch points, every moment that you spend with your dog is a moment that you are influencing their behavior. Whether you're aware of it or not is a completely different question. That is the question we are talking about today. We're talking about how do we build an incredible relationship with our dog when we are working 12-hour days? How do you get it done? Let's find out. Ready to have a calm and peaceful life with your dog without the stress of those fear-based behaviors? Hi, I'm Tracy, and I've been there, overwhelmed by all the conflicting dog training advice and unsure of what to do next. But now I help dog lovers like you simplify your life with your dog by building confidence naturally, fostering trust, and addressing those fear-based challenges. So, if you're ready, stop chopping those chicken wieners and let's get to it. Well, it is Monday, December 30th. I just have to do this because, I would be remiss if I didn't. It is my son's birthday today, so happy birthday, Ben. I can't believe he's 19. How did that happen? Time just seems to fly by. It's bananas. Anyway, happy birthday, Ben. And Ben has been celebrating his birthday the same way, I think, ever since he was 4. And he hasn't changed one bit because I said, what do you want for your birthday dinner? And he was like, I always want tacos. So we're having tacos. That's what we're doing tonight. Oh my goodness, here we are. I don't know, I'm just overwhelmed with all of the love and the well wishes, and everybody's excited about 2025, and I am too. Today I wanted to actually answer a question because this great question came in. We just welcomed somebody into Living Beyond Obedience, and she had a great question, and I thought this would be a great question to share on the podcast. And the question was simply this: how do you find the time to develop that relationship with your dogs? I work 12 hours a day away from home. That, my friends, is a fantastic question. How do you create an incredible bond and relationship with your dog when you're working as you do? And I know that's hard for me because I'm at home with my dogs and my job is my dogs. Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? I will tell you there's good and bad to that. I will be flat out honest with you because I've had so many people over the years be like, oh my gosh, I would love to do what you do, Tracy. I'd love to work with dogs and it would be great. And I will say this, I caution all that do it, that when the thing that you love becomes your job, it's a very fine line. So as long as we can keep it where the thing that we love is still the thing that we love and we're still having fun, then it's something. But if that's not you and that's not your life and you have other things like your job or your family or other commitments, perhaps you've got a lot of stuff going on in your life, then you're like, how do I do it all? How do I have this creative and amazing relationship with my dog while still keeping, all the other balls in the air that I'm juggling in the air? And I get that. So I have some really great news for Sally. Thank you very much for that question. The great news is this, and I have mentioned this before. If you've never heard me mention this before, you'll hear it. I am officially like the plumber with the leaky faucet. I am the person that helps people with their dog training, and I have the least trained dogs. And I used to almost be embarrassed about that fact. I used to think, oh my gosh, like how can I possibly, as the imposter syndrome would come up, how can I possibly tell people how to live with their dogs when I am not doing any of the things that I'm telling people? And that was actually where I made the biggest shift in my career. It was when I finally stopped talking about obedience and we started focusing on, oh, I'm going to do it. Because it comes up we focused on beyond obedience. Oh, look what I did there. But it's absolutely true. is when I had that realization that I was helping people train their dogs. And that's really not what I do. It's not what this is about. It's not what I am about. So the good news for you is if you're kind of like, looking into my life and going, how does she have 8 great dogs? How does she have dogs that she builds this great relationship and bond with? Sure, I'm not working outside the home for 12 hours a day. But the other thing I can tell you, I'm also not training my dogs for 12 hours a day, right? Now, I am home with them a lot more, so I have more interactions with them. But what I will say is this, the beautiful thing about this is that I truly, and I do believe this in my heart of hearts, I truly believe that relationships aren't built in the times that you schedule out to do training or to work with them or to work on your relationship. The the relationship is built in all of the minuscule tiny little moments that happen when you're not working on relationships. It's the tiny little conversations. I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but my friend and fellow dog trainer Karen has a saying that training time is all the time. And I have something similar where I say from the moment that you wake up to the moment that you fall asleep is an opportunity for you to clarify your conversations and your communication with your dog, or cloudy those conversations with your dogs. And what do we mean by both of those things? What are we actually saying when we say that? Is that every single interaction that you have with your dog is a touch point to work on your relationship. Every single moment. So even though you're away from the home for 12 hours a day, that does not make it impossible for you to build incredible bonds. And I will say, my life wasn't always this way. Let's go back. Let's go back down memory lane with Tracy for a second. I used to live in a 800 square foot home in downtown Guelph. And during that time, I had anywhere between 8 to 10 dogs in my home. Was that allowed in downtown Guelph? No. No, I'm sure there was some sort of bylaw that you could only have 2 dogs or something. I don't know, but it didn't matter. Because I had 8 to 10 just good dogs. Nobody complained about my dogs. My dogs weren't barking or carrying on or a problem or a menace. So nobody knew. Nobody cared. Um, and I worked for a while there. I worked as a vet tech. For a short while, I worked in Hamilton, which was a car drive away from me. It was about a 40-minute drive to work. But then I transferred and I started working out of Toronto. And if you are from Canada, I'm sure even if you're not from Canada, you know Toronto. If you know Toronto, you know traffic in Toronto. Um, I started taking a Greyhound bus. I would have to get up. My bus would leave at 5:30. Sometimes I took the 5:50, but most times I tried to grab the 5:30 bus in the morning, and I would try to get the 4:15 bus home. If I missed the 4:15 bus home, and I got the 4:30 bus home, I would be getting home anywhere between 6 and 7 p.m. And as my time in in Toronto and that commute continued on, that timing got longer and longer and longer. So I feel you, Sally. I know what it's like to have lived a life where I was away from the home longer than I was at the home. I very much prioritized my weekends with my dogs. My weekends were my adventures with my dogs. But the short times that I had with them during weekdays, they were still opportunities to create bonds. And here's the thing. I would say one of the things that, for me was that the dogs did become sort of used to the schedule. They knew what it was like. It was almost like it was their job. They knew that this was the time when I wasn't going to be around. They knew that the time that I did come back was the time that we were going to hang out. I'm not going to lie, I didn't do a lot of like walking or anything because I was exhausted. We did have a big backyard. We had a big backyard, and I would hang out in the backyard with them when the weather was good. I would probably eat my dinner out there and hang out with them. And then, our nights were spent. Okay, I have to tell this. I'll tell this. So I may have I may have had a room that was all bed. At one point in time, the bedroom had a queen size bed and a king size bed pushed together against the wall. So it literally was a wall of bed. And then I may have had an entertainment unit and a television set. And my evenings were spent with a bed full of dogs. Did I? Yes, it was a bed. It was a bed full of dogs. I 100% had a bed full of dogs. That was a part of my life for sure. And one of the nicest parts of my life. But it was just, here's my whole point is that even though my life was as busy as it was, and I was commuting and I was spending all this time, riding a bus and whatnot, and my dogs were away. Now I will mention for some of that, I did have, a significant other that was living with me. He worked opposite shift to me. So the dogs weren't all alone, but their life, them, like they knew when it was downtime. They knew when it was going to be time. They knew that on the weekends, we devoted a good portion of our time to do dog stuff. We had, of course, the off-leash dog park that we would take our dogs to, and we would go for like hikes and whatnot. We had done things in the winter time where like some of our dogs, we did some sledding with them where we hooked them up to harnesses and had them we did when we weren't at work, we were doing things with the dogs. Our vacations were always around the dogs. We did a lot of camping with the dogs. Like it really was sort of designed around the dogs. So the dogs were actually sort of, if I can explain it this way, the dogs were part of this life. Like we were like, this is our life and this is your role within it. And because dogs, one, understand patterns, they understand patterns of predictability, and they also like to have jobs. We would literally give them the job of, your job right now is we're hanging out at the house and you have to be quiet because somebody's got to be sleeping. Your job right now is we're playing in the backyard. Everything was very much still ritualistic. And I think I've talked about this before, but I could talk about it more in more detail on another podcast if somebody is like, I don't know what you're talking about, Tracy, but we do things based on ritualistic behavior, as in we have our walks were a ritual of migration. Like we made it an event. A walk wasn't just like, oh God, I got to get the dogs out and I got to take them for a walk so they can go to the bathroom. Our dogs, like our walks were adventures. Like we're going to go somewhere and we're going to find some stuff together and look at this cool thing. Feeding time was a ritual, right? There was excitement allowed during feeding time. There still is to this day. Like we allow excitement around feeding time. It's dinner time. Like let's celebrate feeding time. Rest is a ritual. Like when I rest, they rest. When I move, they move. Like that has always been the same, regardless of my lifestyle. And so when even though there were large portions of that time when our dogs were quote unquote having to do downtime, they didn't look at it like, oh my gosh, we're locked up or whatnot. They were like, this is just our downtime. So we created this life. Now, this was before kids, right? And this is my life with my dogs before kids. So everything was about the dogs, right? Every other, like our downtime was always about them. We designed our life around the dogs, and that design made everything seem very, very copacetic for them. And so, and that has sort of been, maintained throughout my life. I will say that the biggest change, and it wasn't necessarily for the dogs, but more so for me, was when I had kids. When I had my own children, it was kind of like there was this like pull and the guilt, and I'm sure new parents can relate to this feeling. There was a guilt associated with like I'm not spending the same focused attention on the dogs, and we had to try to find a way to blend what we did with the kids, especially when they were younger. Like we made sure we did like ritualistic walks, but we had a stroller now, letting the dogs know that this little thing in the stroller is part of our new ritual of migration. Like it was, it's morphed as my life has changed and as I've added kids and moved and all of the things. Um, but it's always been a ritualistic pattern that we've created for the dogs, this sense of inclusion that even though I'm not there, their job right now is to take care of the place. Like that's like it's almost like you stay here and watch the place. I got to go for a little bit, but I'm going to come back. Then we're going to go do something. So I've adapted it, throughout the stages of my life, but it's always had the same sort of vibe. I've always maintained ritualistic behavior, the ritual of migration, ritual of eating, ritual of rest, all of that stuff. But here's I think the biggest point that I want to make, and this, I truly believe this in my heart of hearts. Um, and the reason why I believe it is because I know lots of people that are focused on really trying hard to have the training time. Like I'm spending at least 15 minutes a day doing some training. I'm making sure that I'm working on this, I'm working on that. I will tell you that it is my experience that the tiny little moments, the tiny little segments of conversation that you have throughout the day, those seemingly meaningless sort of things that happen throughout the day, add up to be way more than you could ever schedule in a training session, right? That's why even people that are taking their dogs to training and trying to carve out time to be like, okay, I'm going to try to take this time to teach the dog this or to work on this or to help them with this. That's why even though they're doing all of those things, they're still coming up going, oh, the dog's just not getting it, or I'm still struggling, or the dog's still barking at the neighbors. It's because we're not talking about the beyond obedience times, right? You're just focused on the work that you're getting done on the scheduled times that you've decided to take to help work on the relationship or work on your training, but you're not paying attention to the other times, these tiny little conversations. When I walk into a room, every time I walk into a room with my dogs, I make an observation of what my dogs do. Does my dogs do my dogs like come to me? Do they move out of my space? Are they having conversations with each other about my presence in the room? Are they resting? Are they alert? Are they looking out the window? Like I'm always like, what are you doing there? If I have a dog, honestly, that's like looking out the window, I'm always like, what are you looking at? And I'll go and look at it. Like, what are we looking at? Even if they're not barking, I'm like, what are we looking at? That touch point right there of me just going, what are we looking at? What's happening out there? Is a moment of connection. Something that you might not even think about, but to a dog, it's everything. Right? When I walk into the room and my dogs are on their bed and I have to ask them to get down, how they get down, when they get down, how long it takes me to get them down, all of those things matter. Those are conversations. Those are things in my head that I go, well, that's how interesting. How interesting. And I don't necessarily judge it or correct anything in that moment. I'm just present and aware of the things that go on. When I get up in the morning and I have to move through space, I will tell you right now, because I am dealing with some very significant joint pain right now. And so I've got a horrible limp and a lot of pain. I've had to ask my dogs to move out of my way more than I usually do. Normally, like I would just step over them, right? Mostly the noofs, because the noofs are like mobile carpets and they're sleeping so soundly that you can just step over them. But now because of my limp and because of my joint pain, I've had to actually ask them to move. Because I've been asking them to move out of my space a lot, it has changed our dynamic a little bit. And I will say I've made some observations on the fact that because I am limping, they're different. And I make observations about that. And I change, and all of these little tiny conversations that happen throughout the day, all of those touch points, every moment that you spend with your dog is a moment that you are influencing their behavior. Whether you're aware of it or not is a completely different question. So for my friend Sally, who's like, I used to have a lot more time to work on this, especially during COVID when I was working from home, and now I'm back to working at 12 hours, and I'm concerned about am I still able to build that kind of great, amazing relationship with my dogs? The answer is 100% yes. We just need to be a little bit more focused on the everyday, minuscule moments that you spend with them, the tiny little conversations that probably maybe be imperceivable to you is always perceivable to the dog, right? It matters to them. So taking a moment, being like, what are we looking at outside? That's a moment. It's a moment of connection. It's a moment of pro-social behavior that adds up in the dog's mind. And so I just find, for me, I'm somebody that really tries to take advantage of those moments, of really trying to be present in every single second that I have with them. And when you start to do that, you're going to see that all of those little conversations added up make more of an impact on your dog than, I would say, a blocked out piece of time where you're like, I'm going to grab my treat pouch and teach my dog something. Now, don't get me wrong. If that's the kind of thing you like to do and that's how you like to spend the time with your dog, that's cool, right? I'm just saying that I don't think those times add up and have as much value as the tiny little moments that we maybe take for granted with our dogs. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Anyway, thank you, Sally. I'm so glad that you are a part of our community, our free Facebook community, Living Beyond Obedience. Thank you very much for your post. Thank you for introducing yourself. If you are not in our free Facebook group, Living Beyond Obedience, why not? Why not? Do me a solid. Go over to Facebook right now. It's Living Beyond Obedience. Click that join button and get on in there. Introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit more about you and your dogs. Ask some questions. We are going to be doing some like Q&As and live Q&As over in that free community starting in January as well. I want to start helping more and more people. There's also some exciting announcements coming in January where you can start to work with me personally, one-on-one. That's going to be exciting. I'm really excited about that. All right. I think that's it for me today. New Year's is coming up. Are you doing something? I should probably do a thing about fireworks. I just saw that actually at Canadian Tire when I was driving by today. They were like, lots of fireworks for New Year's. And I'm like, do we do fireworks on New Year's? I guess we do. I probably, if I had been more thoughtful, I would have done a thing on fireworks. But here's the thing. I'm not a noise phobia expert. I will come right out and say that. I am not a noise phobia expert. All I can say is that take the time. If you have a dog that is really uncomfortable about fireworks, then let's be leaving them inside, on the 31st. Let's just not let them out for that. I always get very upset when I see people taking their dogs to fireworks because I'm like, it's not really a thing for dogs. Even if your dog digs fireworks, it's not really for the dogs, Like, it's not an event where dogs are like, hey, you want to go see the shining explosions in the sky? No dogs are going to do that. They're not doing that. I don't know why we do that. We don't really think about the dog. Anywho, there's just some controversy to end this episode. All right, I think that's it for me today. Have a happy new year. I will see you in 2025. So many good things coming our way. Can't wait to do more with you. As always, get out there today and be the person that your dog thinks you are, because your dog thinks that you're amazing. And So do I. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now. Oh, and one more thing. This podcast is meant for entertainment and education purposes only and is not meant to replace hands-on professional training. If you're really struggling with your dog, please reach out to a professional in your area. All right, I think that's it. Bye for now.